Joining me now to discuss, Douglas Holtz-Eakin, American Action Forum president and former chief economist of the President's Council of Economic Advisors, and Andrew Ross Sorkin, founder of DealBook and CNBC anchor. Andrew, can you speak to this disconnect?
Well, it does feel like a disconnect because, as you said, we're going to be seeing some really terrible numbers in terms of unemployment by the end of this week, and there's so many families around the country that are hurting. The disconnect is this. Investors, and the market is not the real economy. Investors are not looking at what the world looks like today. They're looking at what the world looks like 12 months from now, so next May. And what they're doing is saying to themselves and hoping, a lot of praying is involved in this, that our world looks very, very different than it does today. So they are, quote unquote, looking through, if you will, looking through what is a terrible situation in this very moment. And they're hoping that between therapeutics, testing, potential vaccines, and the like, that the world looks, as I said, very different 12 months from now. Whether it is a huge, huge question, and that's what makes a market.
But even if we get those things, Doug, consumers have been the ones driving the U.S. economy for years. That is who we are. And right now, you've got 30 million more people on unemployment. 1 in 4 Americans have faced a pay cut or a wage decrease of some sort. We're certainly not going to go out there and be spending with any great gusto. So where does this optimism come from? Because it's not on Main Street. Main Street's closed.
Well, I think Andrew's got this exactly right. It's looking past the current conditions, which are, quite frankly, horrific. If we see what I expect, about 21 million Americans lose their job in April, we're going to see them either show up as unemployed, in which case the unemployment rate is going to be over 17%, or they're going to be out of the labor force entirely, in which case we're going to see a record drop in labor force participation, probably 8 percentage points. So these conditions are terrible. What investors are hoping is that if you open up the economy and we contain the virus, then people will be able to get back to work. That's a paycheck. That will give them the ability to spend more, and the momentum will build. There's an enormous backlog of things that people could spend on. I don't expect it'll come out like a rocket, but the mechanics of recovery have worked in bad recessions before, and certainly they can work again.
But this time it's different. Who's got to put up the money to reopen the economy? Andrew, when you look at all the big changes that, whether you're talking about an office space or a restaurant, need to make in order to reopen safely, very few industries actually have that kind of money. They've got that cash on hand or they have those margins. Does the government need to step in and pay for the reopening?
Well, look, it very well may. And my concern is, while the market is very optimistic about what the world looks like in 12 months, it's going to be a very bumpy road to get there if we get there. A lot of things have to cut the right way, if you will. You do have to get the testing right. You do have to get the therapeutics right. And you hopefully have to get a vaccine right. And all of that's going to require, I hate to say it, a lot of hard work and maybe a little bit of luck. And it could go against us. We could have a second wave of infections. That's not something that's built in, if you will, to the market. The other thing that I'm particularly concerned about is while the expectation in the stock market may be that the economy recovers, I don't know what's going to look like in the world of employment, whether employment is truly going to recover. In part because of what you just said, Stephanie. There's so many small businesses that are going to struggle to reopen, and it's those businesses that are going to be the ones that are most hurt and are going to hurt the most people in terms of the employment picture. And so do those jobs come back? I'm also not just worried about small businesses in terms of that employment picture. There's also the large businesses. You know, if you look at even the ADP employment report today, so many of those jobs came from large companies laying off people. And one of the worst things that happens in a crisis, happened in 2008, is that companies used the moment, if you will, and I hate to say this, as an opportunity to become, quote unquote, more efficient, more productive. Now, maybe that helps the GDP number, but it doesn't help employment. And long term, it's hard to see how that helps the economy.
What about the opportunity, Doug, to take government help or ask for government help at a moment when you can? Headline crossing today that the auto industry, no surprise, has seen a huge drop in demand for car buyers. And now we're seeing some lawmakers and industry leaders asking the government to step in and support the business. That certainly doesn't sound like something that would happen in any capitalist America I live in.
Well, I thought the CARES Act was a tremendous moment because it was an equal opportunity help for every business in the United States, and every business was equally affected, large, small. No one did anything wrong. It was the virus that shut things down. So the idea of providing an enormous amount of cash to wrap this economy in support for 2 months made a lot of sense. Now going forward, if we're capable of reopening, we take care of the health mission, then businesses are going to have to make some decisions on their own, and we shouldn't be picking businesses. We shouldn't be favoring one over the other. I'm with Andrew. I think the employment picture is going to be very rocky going forward. There are about 11% of employment that are in airlines and hotels and restaurants and bars and entertainment and casinos. Those aren't not going to come back right away. I just don't see any realistic way that'll happen. And the remainder are going to spend their time trying to figure out how to work safely in their workplaces. How can you reconfigure them? How can you test employees? That's going to occupy the business community much more than, hey, who can I hire this week? How can we grow? So I think we will recover. I just think it's going to take more time than perhaps a lot of people think.
And possibly a whole lot more money. Andrew, Douglas, thank you both for joining me. And I want you